What's up guys, I'm back, and today we're having a look at 10 items that got removed from Smite for various reasons. I'll leave links in the description to wiki pages for these items and the removed items page, if you guys want to do any more research for yourselves. But these are just 10 of the coolest ones from that page that I picked out, so let's get into it. Coming in at number 10, we've got Circlet of Focus. The cool thing about this item was the focus mechanic that it had attached to it, and many other items at the time had this as well. It granted 30 focus plus additional focus for using abilities and things like that from the passive. And the focus mechanic was kind of opposite to the current crowd control reduction mechanic that we have in the game, which increased the strength of your CCs or the duration of your CCs that you applied to enemies if you had a required amount of focus. The book is a bit unclear on exactly how the mechanic works, like if it increased duration or if it increased effects and when it did it, how much focus you needed, that sort of stuff. It's quite vague on it, but a lot of items had this mechanic back then, like Divine Ruin, Demonic Grip, Frostbound Hammer, Bulwark of Hope, Chronos Pendant, and a lot more items. It was just a cool mechanic to have in the game, and that's why I put this item at number 10. It's not really this item specifically, just that mechanic in general was pretty cool. At number 9 we've got Achov the Golem. This item was pretty cool because it was similar to the old Runeforged Hammer passive, if you guys were around for that, but instead of converting physical protection to power, it converted health to power. So you could build this on like a really tanky warrior with like 3000 health or something and give you 30 physical power back, which was pretty nice. Don't think it would have been as OP as the previous Runeforged Hammer where it was just built on every single warrior in solo lane, but it would still be pretty strong, I'd imagine. Plus it was quite cheap at 2100 gold, so it could be a nice item, you know, on solo lane as if it still existed in the current build of Smite. Not that amazing revolutionary of an item, but it was quite a cool thing to, you know, to have in the game. At number 8 we've actually got 4 different items. There's Mart's Tome, if that's how you pronounce it, I don't fucking know how to pronounce that shit. Devourers Touch, Ascendance, and Warlock's Ring. Now you might be thinking, those sound a lot similar to items that we have in the game right now, and you'd be right, because these items technically weren't totally removed from the game, they were adaptations of current versions of stacking items that we have in the game now. So Devourer's Touch was a version of Devourer's Gauntlets that exists in the current game. But instead of stacking the items up from last hits and kills, you would gain 1 stack per minute that you own the item, kind of like Chronos' new passive. So you just buy the item and eventually you get the stacks up, you know, if you had it for a certain amount of minutes, and you wouldn't have to actually do anything like farming to get the stacks. It's cool to see how these items were changed from the forms that they were in then to the forms that they're in now, even though I think the newer versions are much better since they're a bit more engaging and you actually have to farm to get the stacks rather than just getting it for free. It could be cool to add this kind of concept onto some new items that will be added into the game. And they're just cool versions of, you know, current items that are in the game that technically weren't removed, but they were drastically changed, and they had different names back then as well, you know. Transcendence was Ascendance, Warlock's Sash was Warlock's Ring, and Book of Thoth was Mart's Tome. At number 7 we got Frostbound Amulet. This was basically the ability based version of Frostbound Hammer. So you'd hit someone with your physical abilities and they would get slowed by it. Or, you know, the physical version of Gem of Isolation, however you want to think about it. Once again, it's kind of like Achov the Golem. It's not a revolutionary item, but I can just imagine an Osiris running around with both Frostbound Hammer and Frostbound Amulet and just destroying people because they feel like no movement speed by the time you hit them with that many slows. I mean, that's not exactly how slows works, but you could basically constantly have a slow applied to them if you had both these items plus Osiris' 2 slows that he has in his kit. That is not something I would want to see, but it's a cool item concept nonetheless. At number 6 we've got Hastened for Talis. This was a very infamous item removal that happened really recently in the mid-season patch. So I imagine most of the people watching will probably have, you know, experienced this item since it got removed really recently. But I'll just go over it briefly. It basically works similar to how Hastened Katana and Hastened Ring work in the current game, but it was available to every class and every role. So, you know, hunters abused the fuck out of the item obviously for its boxing potential after it got buffed from where it was in its previous state. And it got removed by high-res just to stop hunters using it and replaced by Hastened Ring and Hastened Katana. It's also worth mentioning the very first iteration of this item before it got changed to Hastened for Talis. It works similar to how current Atlantis Bow works, or Atalanta's Bow, sorry. Basically when you hit basic attacks you increase your movement speed and your attack speed by 5% per stack for a maximum of 3 stacks. So you ended up with 15% movement speed and attack speed if you hit 3 successful basics. But this was eventually changed to the infamous Hastened talis, which then got buffed, and hunters have used it, and it got removed in the Season 4 mid-season patch. At number 5 we've got Gem of Gaia. I don't mean Stone of Gaia, I mean Gem of Gaia. Basically kind of the magical version of the current Stone of Gaia, where it increased your mana regen based on a percentage of your missing mana. So it kind of worked like how Sands of Time and Hydra's Lament do in the current game. Like you gained 1% increased mana regen for every 1% of your missing mana. So if you're completely out of mana, it basically doubled your current mana regen that you had. It would be quite a cool item to have on gods like Sobek that use a lot of mana and can sustain themselves based on that mana. You know, health sustain via like abilities and things like that, but I'm not sure how viable it would be in the current game since mana's not that important. People prefer health regen over mana regen generally. Still a cool item that you could have in the game though. At number 4 we got mannequinscepter. Now this is an item that was introduced in the Season 2 PTS client, but it never made it to the actual full build of Season 2. It was effectively Bluestone Pendant, but for basic attacks instead of abilities. Whenever you landed a basic attack, you burned the enemy, doing 2 ticks of damage like Bluestone does, but you also slowed them for 8%. You know, nothing too crazy, it's just a cool concept, but I'm not sure why this item was actually never made it to the full version of the Season 2, so if anyone knows why, then leave it in the comments because the wiki doesn't exactly say why it was removed, it just says it was removed. At number 3 we got Wall of Absolution. This is actually probably my favourite item on this list in terms of if it was brought back. It functions similar to how the current Celestial Legion Helm works, but kind of a reversed effect. Like the current Celestial Legion Helm stacks up physical protection while you're out of combat and then removes it when you take damage. Well, this was kind of the reverse. When you got into combat and took some damage, it ramped up your protections until, you know, you were out of combat and they would drop off. Basically, it stacked up physical protections, 15 per stack, when you took basic attack damage. So you would end up with 45 total physical protections after 3 basic attacks, which was the maximum stacks. On top of the base 60 protections on the item, which was 105 physical protections for quite a cheap price if you're getting auto-attacked a lot. Which, you know, you combine that with a Megardian mail or a Hyderthanemian line or something and you're really going to be countering auto-attackers pretty hard. I'd honestly like to see this being reintroduced or, you know, in some different form. Like, increased physical protections based on taking basic attacks or taking physical damage, I think is a lot cooler than stacking it up while you're out of combat because it just promotes people turtling and not fighting, waiting for their stacks back. I don't really like Celestial Legion Helm the way it is. This will be a lot cooler to have in the game in my opinion. At number 2 we've got Wrath of Heaven. Now this is a really weird item, definitely the weirdest one on the list. It basically gave you an additional 50% of your magical power on your auto attacks as long as every ability you had was on cooldown. Like, I could only really see this being used on Freya. Like basically if you'd used your ult at some point and it was on cooldown, you can banish someone, pop your 2-1 combo, then all your abilities would go on cooldown and you'd have that additional 50% scaling plus the pulse and irradiate damage, plus the damage from an additional basic attack. You'd probably shred people with this build. But I'm not sure it'd be that useful on anyone other than Freya. Like, Kronos' cooldown on his 1 is quite short, so you know, you might end up, that'll come back up and he won't make so much use out of the passive. It was a really weird item to get to work by the looks of it. Like, it's quite hard to judge how good it would have been back then because the meta was different, but I couldn't really see it being that useful, except for on Freya in the current meta. But it was a very unique item, and I'd like to see more stuff like this from Hi-Rez in the future because it was really cool and we haven't really seen anything like it since to this day, so that's number 2. And at number 1 we've got Golden Bow, easily the most infamous item removal on this list. An item that sat on the sidelines for years, being built pretty much exclusively on Mercury because of Major Luck's AoE basic attack capabilities. This item received some major buffs at the start of Season 3 that skyrocketed its popularity among hunters, who have used the item for the fast wave clear, as well as throwing dagger of course, not just Golden Bow. Instead of reverting the item back to its previous state, Hi-Rez just decided to remove it from the game entirely in patch 3.12, and nothing like it has been seen since as a replacement or anything. I mean, personally, I'm just going to throw it out there, I'm kinda glad it's gone, but I'm sure some people are a bit salty that the Golden Bow got taken away. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, leave a comment if you want, saying what your favourite item was from the list, because that'll be interesting to know, because mine is definitely Wall of Absolution, and that looks like a really cool item. Unless it was a talis, then screw you, fuck off. I'm just kidding. Like I said at the start of the video, I'll leave links to these items on the Smite wiki if you want to check them out and learn a bit more about them or other removed items. That's about it. Peace.